Hello there. Please have a seat. So, how can I help you?
Hi, well, I lost my job last week. I was made redundant,
I see.
and I was told to come here to claim unemployment benefit.
Right, well, I need to take some details from you. First of all, can I have your name, please?
John Carragher.
Sorry, could you spell your surname, please?
Sure, it's Carragher.
Right, thanks. And do you have your social security number with you?
Yes, I do. The company told me that I'd need it. Just a second.
Okay.
Here we are. WK 872344E.
WK872344E. Okay, I should be able to get your details on the screen now. Just a moment, please.
Okay.
Yes, here we are. Can I just check some details with you? Are you still at Sandy Lane?
Oh, no. We moved a couple years ago. Our address is Newborough Road, 313 Newborough Road.
Okay, 313 Newborough. Is that Newburgh?
Newbourough.
Okay. So that means your telephone number has changed as well, has it?
Yes, it's now 0364 5748 1724.
036457481724.
That's it.
Now, no doubt you'd like to know how much you receive each month.
Yes, that'd be very helpful.
Okay, so I need to check your situation. So, first of all, you're still married.
Oh, yes, very happily.
Okay, and according to your records, you have 2 children.
Well, that's changed. We have 3 now. A baby girl just 6 months ago.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you. Not the best time to lose a job.
No, not at all. So that's why you moved house, was it?
That's right. We needed an extra bedroom.
Okay, so I just need to ask you about your new place. Is it a house or an apartment?
It's an apartment, actually.
And how many rooms are there?
Well, let me see. There's a living room, a bathroom, a kitchen, 2 toilets, actually, and 3 bedrooms.
Okay, and is it rented or did you purchase it?
It's rented.
Right. Sorry, but I need to ask you how much the monthly rent is.
£470.
Okay, and how much do you pay for utilities?
Sorry?
How much do you pay approximately for gas, electricity, water monthly?
Gas is about £35. Electricity, not so much, about £27. And water, usually about 14.
Okay, please just give me a few minutes while I calculate the benefits you should receive.
Well, a very good morning, everyone. My name's Brian, and I'll be your guide on this tour of the Mount Pleasant Retirement Village. I trust you won't mind getting in and out of the golf cars. They do save on the walking, and they're much easier to get around on than using the minibus. Just a little bit of background information before we set off. The Mount Pleasant area was previously used for farming until about 8 years ago. The farmer wanted to retire, and so he sold off the land, including the farm buildings. The farm buildings have been converted to the retirement flats, and we'll have a close look at these at the end of the tour. The developers felt that this was an ideal location for a retirement village. The location makes it extremely convenient to get to most of the places retired people in this area like to visit. At the same time, it's also not too close to the main roads, so it's not at all a noisy area. But the main reason was for the spectacular landscape you can see all around you from up here. The layout of the village itself can be divided into 3 areas. You have, as I mentioned, the commercial area behind us at the moment, where you have the local supermarket, coffee shops, and a few other shops. In front of us, we can see the highest point of the area and the gardens around it. And then between the two, you have the residential area. The golf course is over to the right, but we'll get a better view of that and everything else from the high point. So let's go there now. Okay, so here we are at the high point, and from up here we can get a very clear understanding of the layout of the village. On the west side you can see a few small buildings with an outdoor pool, and those are in fact Finnish style saunas. If you look to the left of those, you can see another small building with chairs outside, and that's a cafe bar where you can relax after your sauna and enjoy the scenery. In front of us you can all see the lake, and on the right hand side there's an area reserved for fishing. Nobody's there at the moment it seems, and on the opposite side there's a paddle boat area. Great fun and good exercise too. Then moving around to the east side, you can see first of all the residential flats and the car park behind them, and then just north of the flats and the car park you can see the entrance to the golf course. Okay, just a couple of other buildings to point out to you. If we look directly south, just a short walk from the flats, you can see a windy path, and that leads to the village hall. It's there where most of the evening events are held. Dances and shows. Also, sometimes they have a small Saturday market, and it's also used for meetings as well. Then over to you.
Well, as I'm sure you all know, I was invited here today to talk about single parenting. In fact, most of the single parents in the world today are single women, and so I'll be focusing mainly on single women rather than single parents. Please feel free to ask any questions as we go through. First of all, you may find some of the statistics I'm going to throw at you rather surprising. Contrary to popular opinion, single-parent families do not make up a relatively small percentage of the total.
Sorry, so would you be able to tell us what percentage of all families are single women families?
Yes, indeed. Let me give you some figures from around the world. Currently, the US has the highest percentage at 34% of the total. In Canada, the figure is somewhat lower. There is about 22%. Turning to Europe, for Austria and Denmark, for example, the figures are about the same, around 19%. So you can see that this is not a small group. In fact, they are making up just under a quarter to 1/3 of the total.
So has this always been the case?
Well, it certainly wasn't the case in the States 30 years ago. At that time, there were only 13% of families headed by a single woman.
I see.
There's also quite a marked variation in the numbers depending on race, which you might find of interest. Again, these figures are just for the US. Currently, the proportion of white families headed by a single mother is about 22%, whereas the black families, the figure is about 57%, and for Hispanic families, the percentage of single mothers is around 33%. As I say, those figures are for the States.
So, what do people think are the main reasons for these fairly high numbers? I mean, not all of these single parents want to be single parents, right?
Well, that's right. There are some, of course, who do, but I'll come back to that group later. But there are, of course, many reasons why women are left on their own. In fact, sometimes they are not left because they were never in stable relationship in the first place. There are a considerable number of out-of-marriage births. And then there are a number of single mothers who are widows, but again, this is not a large percentage. The single biggest factor is, as you may expect, increased in the divorce rate. Back in the 60s, it was under 10% for couples under 30. That figure increased gradually until it reached about 29% 5 years ago. Since then, the figure has fallen slightly to about 24%. The other aspect of single parenting, which you might be interested in, is the number of teenage mothers. These figures are quite alarming. At the moment, teens account for about 15% of all births in the United States, and worldwide, adolescents give birth to around 14 million children annually.
14 million? That's a bit shocking. So, what are the main factors which contribute to teenage pregnancy?
There are many factors. One of the main factors, of course, is poverty. And another major contributor is education, or rather the lack of it, particularly with respect to contraception. And there are other factors which play a part. For instance, the perception that female teens have of there being very few opportunities available to them, or the lack of an adult role model, someone they can look up to. Also, peer pressure.
There seem to be so many problems. Are there any solutions?
Well, there are long-term solutions, yes, and most of them rely on education. A girl is much less likely to get pregnant if, for instance, she has close family ties. So again, we see how the importance of a strong family comes into it. In addition, if a girl has aspirations for the future or high expectations of life, then again, she is far less likely to become pregnant. High self-esteem also plays a very significant part, and that comes, as we know, from both good schooling and good parenting.
Now, you mentioned a group of women who choose to be single mothers.
Yes, I did. And I think it's definitely worth mentioning that this group is significant in terms of numbers and is growing. I suppose there are two subgroups here: women who choose to raise their own children by themselves, and more recently, those who choose to adopt. It is becoming easier for these women as a result of probably three changes: an increase in child benefit payments from the state, an increase in the employment opportunities for women in today's society, and a growing acceptance by society of this kind of family.
Good morning, everyone. I've been invited here today to talk briefly about the Social Security system in the US. Now, clearly, we don't have time to go into too much detail, so I shall cover what I believe to be the main points, and of course, I'll be happy to take any questions at the end. Right. One of the great social and economic successes of the early 20th century was the effort to pass meaningful social insurance laws in the 1930s. Being old all too often also meant being poor. The Social Security Act of 1935 helped change all of that. Today, thanks largely to Social Security, people know that they will have a dependable source of income when they retire. In fact, these days, only about 12% of older Americans fall below the poverty line. So it was on June 8, 1934, that President Franklin D. Roosevelt announced his intention to provide a program for Social Security. And in January 1935, a committee responsible for the new program made its report to the President on January 17. On January 17, the President introduced the report to both houses of Congress for their simultaneous consideration. Each house passed its own version, but eventually the differences were resolved and the Social Security Act was signed into law on August 14, 1935. In addition to several other provisions of general welfare, the new Act created a Social Security program designed to pay retired workers aged 65 or above a continuing income after retirement. The first monumental task was the need to register employers and workers before January 1, 1937. This was the date when workers would begin acquiring credits towards old age security benefits. Actually, the task was carried out by the US Postal Service. They were able to distribute the applications at the beginning of November 1936. The post offices then collected the completed forms, typed the Social Security number cards or SSN cards, and returned the cards to the applicants. The applications were then forwarded to the Social Security Bureau Processing Center, which was located in Baltimore. There, the numbers were registered and various employment records established. Over 35 million SSN cards were issued using this procedure in 1936-1937. Under the 1935 law, monthly benefits would start in 1942. From 1937 to 1942, it was agreed that Social Security was to pay benefits to retirees in the form of one single lump sum payment. The earliest reported applicant for a lump sum payment was a retired Cleveland tram driver named Ernest Ackerman. Ernest retired one day after the Social Security program began. During his one day of participation in the program, a nickel, or perhaps I should say 5 cents, was taken from Mr. Ackerman's pay for Social Security, and upon retiring, he received a lump sum payment of 17 cents. The average payment during this period was $58.06. The smallest ever payment made was just 5 cents. The first payments of monthly benefits began in January 1940. On January 31, 1940, the very first monthly retirement cheque was issued to a retired secretary, a lady by the name of Ida May Fuller from Vermont. The amount was just $22.54. Miss Fuller died in January 1975 at the age of 100. During her 35 years as a beneficiary, she received about $22,000 in benefits. From 1940 until 1950, virtually no changes were made to the Social Security program. Due to the program still being in its infancy, Social Security's retirement payments were very low. In fact, until 1951, only about 50% of American workers were covered under the program. In 1950, though, major amendments were made. These amendments raised payouts for the first time and put the program on the right track for universal acceptance across the states. Also included in the 1950 amendments was new legislation concerning the first COLA, or Cost of Living Allowance. These annual rises in Social Security benefits, designed to keep up with inflation, are now something that most people take for granted. But in fact, when Ida May Fuller took receipt of her first $22.54 benefit in January of 1940, this was the monthly amount she expected to receive for life. It's not surprising that when the first COLA was implemented 10 years later, it produced a 79% increase in the value of the monthly benefits. From then on, the benefits were increased, but only when Congress endorsed special legislation. It wasn't until 1972 that the law was changed to make annual COLAs standard practice, and even then, the system didn't start until 1975. Fortunately, these days, beneficiaries no longer have to wait for a special act of Congress to receive a benefit increase, and no longer does inflation drain value from Social Security benefits.